As well as the societal pressures and constraints on rolling out technology, there's the law to back that up. Helen, can you add a few words on that and technology at this stage?
Yes, there certainly is, and I think it's an interesting one there. Peter mentions, the difference in terms of the approach, perhaps traditionally in the UK as regards technology and usage and intrusion into life and monitoring of life compared with other jurisdictions. Certainly here we are subject to that wonderful piece of legislation which we're implementing, which is the GDPR, and that requires any personal data, so any storage of data that is likely to be sensitive or personal, it potentially, if it isn't dealt with correctly, can open us to fines and swinging fines. And so that's something to be mindful of, not just in terms of collecting data using the FM facilities of a building, but be it a thermal imaging camera or some other tracking device, but also, and particularly if it picks up data about the vulnerable and that they're susceptible, for instance, to a medical condition. And I think that's one of the challenges of post-COVID, is that we do know that there are features coming out where people are more susceptible and more vulnerable, and these tend to be associated with underlying medical conditions and so forth. People may not have been willing to disclose those previously, they may be more so now, but there still is a wider horizon there. And I think, as you say, if this what people might accept today, they may not accept tomorrow. And then, of course, there's the realms of employment legislation, which I've mentioned, and I think Peter touched on lightly, but you wouldn't want to be in a position where there was in some way a discrimination use of data that could perhaps be suggested because of certain cultures, sectors, and so on, demographics even, and those things have to be watched. However, one thing I would say is that there is also a demographic sort of acceptance of the use of data and the intrusion of data, whereas the older generation traditionally were more wary of it. Certainly the younger generation have much more comfort with apps and mobile and smart tech, and so it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of workforce and what people will be prepared to accept. But certainly legislation is there, and we will need to be very mindful of it in terms of our building systems and tracking and data storage.